Welcome to Sandwich Seniority. I'm your host, Robbie Haig. Today I am speaking with Patrick Ellis, who is running for state representative here in wonderful Sandwich.
Good morning, Robbie.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
I would like, if you would, tell our public a little bit about you, Patrick.
All right, well, good morning. My name is Patrick Ellis. I'm a candidate for the 5th Barnstable State Representative's position, which involves all of Sandwich. It involves 2 precincts in Barnstable, West Barnstable and Marston's Mills. Mm-hmm. It also is 3 precincts in Bourne, one being Sagamore Beach, the other being both sides of the canal running along to Buzzards Bay, okay, and a brand new precinct, Monument Beach, Precinct 7. Okay. In addition to that, the district also includes Precinct 9 in Plymouth, which is brand new. And
Really?
It's largely the area around the ponds of Plymouth.
Yes.
And around Lunn Road,
right,
leading down. A tremendously large subdivision.
Yes, it is.
It's a really nice neighborhood. I canvassed there on Sunday, and it was really nice.
Excellent.
Hot.
Yeah, it was hot. It was. But they appreciate you a great deal when you're out in the hot.
Yep, they certainly do.
Yeah. What made you get into this? What?
Well, I've been fortunate. I grew up in Sandwich, mm-hmm, graduated from high school here, from an old family, multiple generation family. I was from a family that was really valued public service. My father was involved in, for example, my father was on the Board of Health in Sandwich for 33 years.
Really?
And I recall being at his funeral and for the services prior to that, and my brothers and I thinking, imagine they held Board of Health meetings on Monday nights, and imagine someone committing 33 years of Monday nights.
Amazing.
So coming from a family like that, we've all been involved in public service. It's very important. In my family, if you're not active in government, you're probably active in a civic organization, or you're active in your church, or you're active in the choir, or you're active in theater.
The key word is active.
Yes, and
Yeah.
we're fortunate. My mother is still alive and still very active herself at 89.
Wonderful.
And still sings in the church and
Wonderful.
still is very active in the choir.
Excellent.
So I really come to that naturally as a family member. And mm-hmm, I was involved in government for almost 22 years in Sandwich, beginning as tree warden, and then eventually becoming the town's first superintendent of public works. And I did that job for 10 years. And then after having spent 22 years in public life, I went into the private sector and spent 15 years in the private sector. And 2 years ago, I retired from that.
Oh.
And was fortunate
Welcome to Seniority.
And was fortunate to do well in business. And I feel very privileged that I'm in the position to offer my services to the district. Excellent. And my experiences in both government and business have been very successful, and I'm proud of that. And I think I can bring those same qualities to this position. It's a very important district and has a lot of real significant issues.
Sandwich is just a lovely, lovely area.
It
well,
is.
The whole area is lovely.
It is, yes.
But it's nice living in Sandwich,
Yeah,
right?
it certainly is.
Yes. Tell me some of the important issues as you see them.
Well, because I was involved in public works, I saw how important that is to all aspects of life. And that's why, for me, the priorities, and they fall right in line with where we are economically, because the priorities for me are transportation and the environment.
Okay.
And in addition to that, education. And I think what's important for Upper Cape Cod particularly is that we are the gateway to Cape Cod.
Right.
You can't come to Cape Cod without traveling through the 5th Barnstable District.
Right.
We have both bridges,
Mm-hmm.
we have the canal, we have Route 6, we have Route 28, we have Route 3, and we have Route 25 approaching the Bourne Bridge.
Right.
And in my opinion, the past reps have not attended themselves to these issues, which is why we had our Memorial Day. We continue to have terrific traffic issues, right up
Yeah.
until almost every Sunday.
Yes.
As I mentioned going to you earlier about canvassing in Plymouth, it took us 45 minutes to get from my home Sunday afternoon to Precinct 9 in
hard.
Plymouth
Yeah.
on a regular, any day Sunday. And I really maintain that this is something that we can solve. But we need people to really apply themselves to it who have long-term experience. And transportation was my profession.
Good.
It's what I believe in strongly. And I think the thing I liked about transportation more than anything else was that it was clearly accessible to everyone. We put roads out there for people to use. We know that that's an important part. Roads are important for public safety. Roads are important for education. Roads are important for senior services. Roads are important for nearly every aspect of government. They're the link that ties us together. They're also a tremendous economic engine because they involve the necessary maintenance to keep them in good condition and will require that constant tweaking as time goes on.
And keep people working.
And keep people working, exactly.
How do you feel about the change in the flyover, as they call it? Do you think it's working?
Oh, the flyover was very successful, but it's probably only 1/4 of what we really needed to do. And if you look at the sequence of improvements that were made over a period of decades, and you look at what we did, as we first finished Route 25 and the approach to the Bourne Bridge, we eliminated the access to Cape Cod via the Rotary in Bourne.
Right.
And the flyover was the next phase of that. Since that time, we haven't advanced this. Remember, the flyover was designed in the 80s, constructed in the 90s,
Right.
and now another decade's gone by. It's very simple math in terms of evaluating this, because the bridges were constructed as we presently use them. In 1935, they were finished.
Right.
In 1935, there were less than 50,000 people on Cape Cod. Today, there are 250,000 people who live on Cape Cod year-round.
Really? And then you add to that the people who are
And
coming.
then add the daily retail traffic,
Right.
the daily tradesman traffic, the daily commuting traffic, and you understand why we're where we are.
Right. And then the vacationing traffic is.
And I think one of the things that's harmed our economy dramatically is the lack of day trippers to Cape Cod. And if we had an efficient transportation network at the bridges, and it was not such a tight funnel onto Cape Cod, I think we would have a tremendous boost to businesses by virtue of people coming here for the day.
Right.
Now that's really not as achievable as it was 25 years ago. People don't want to spend an hour waiting in traffic to get on,
Very
and an
true.
hour to get off
Right.
on a one-day trip to the Cape. So I think that the transportation dilemma is holding back the development of businesses that depend on day trip traffic and weekenders. And I think we can solve this. And one of the things about bridges that are, for this, I think a new bridge is appropriate. And I think the other thing about bridges is that they're relatively inexpensive, which is hard for people to understand, but when you think about a bridge, it doesn't have an HVAC system. It doesn't have to be heated. It doesn't have significant lighting other than street lighting. It doesn't have all of the facilities that go. An example, in Vermont, just west of Burlington, there's a bridge that crosses Lake Champlain into New York. And it was recently rebuilt in a 2-year period for $76 million.
Wow.
Now, a bridge of the magnitude of the Cape Cod Canal, which is probably a smaller span, including road and approach work, might be in the order of 100 to perhaps even $200 million. But if you compare that to this, the Harwich and Chatham are combining their school system and are about to build a brand new high school.
Wow.
$61 million
Wow.
is the price of the high school.
Wow.
Compare that against a $76 million bridge.
Right.
Now, only Chatham and Harwich children are going to go to this school.
Right.
And perhaps maybe 100 and some odd kids per class. So 400 children are going to use this facility in addition to the community,
Right.
and the community is going to have to spend $61 million to establish the school. $200 million for us to put a brand new bridge there to benefit 250,000 year-round residents is a very small amount of money.
Right. Very well put, Patrick.
But it takes leadership to do that.
Yes.
Someone has to be out in front and suggesting to people that we do this.
So am I to believe that that's going to be your first on the agenda?
Well, it's one of the things that I think we need. Bridges are long-term projects that require vetting through public participation, and there will be a lot of players in this. And it will take perhaps it could take perhaps 5 to 7 years to get a project like this done. But someone has to start it. Someone has to initiate the conversation, and that's where I am. I think if I were to focus on issues in the position, I think the very first issue I would work on, because it's such a paramount issue, is the need for beach replenishment, nourishment at Sandwich beaches.
Okay.
We've been terribly and adversely impacted by the construction of the canal, and we need to, again, bring the people to the table to resolve that issue. It's an issue that's been resolved up and down the East Coast, but again, it's an issue that requires leadership. Someone has to bring the players together and sit down and get it done. And I'm actually proud of my involvement in government because it teaches you patience in resolving problems because they can't be resolved quickly.
Right.
And the people who know me from my existing public life know that I'm a patient person, I'm a persistent person, and I'm consistent in my beliefs. And I will stay on something until it's resolved.
Wonderful. So are there other issues that you would like to be working on when you...
One particular issue that I think is very large, particularly for Sandwich, Plymouth, Bourne, and Barnstable, the district communities. We haven't altered our funding strategy for education since 1993. In 1993, we passed legislation that was, in Massachusetts, that was what is known generically as education reform. And it was a good bill at the time. But like most laws that involve reimbursement of money to communities, they need to be tweaked so that they best represent what's going on the ground at that time. In 1993, when we passed ed reform, we didn't have school choice. Children couldn't go to any school they want.
Oh, okay.
We also didn't have charter schools, which have become very important in most systems. But they also take money in and out of school districts without the district having any control over it. And communities that have very excellent schools and provide high level of specialized services draw people from other communities to go to those schools, and we don't have control over those costs.
Right.
So for nearly everyone living in the 5th Barnstable district, it would be advantageous for us to re-look at the Ed Reform Act. Because one of the parts of it that is erroneous is that the Boston legislators firmly believe that everyone on Cape Cod is a millionaire living in a McMansion right on the water.
Right, right.
And there's a lack of understanding of a strong middle class and a strong working class in our communities. And they think that we have hundreds and hundreds of vacation homes and big hotels that add significant revenues to the town. It's one of the ways in which the Upper Cape and the Lower Cape differ greatly because of our small percentage of seasonal homes that contribute to our tax levy without drawing services. So for me, I think that's something that needs to be brought out into the daylight, and we need to rework what it does. Because the disadvantage is that it treats children differently from town to town based on the socioeconomic conditions that are going on in that town. So for example, a child in the state reimburses Cambridge $21,000 per child, but only reimburses Sandwich $9,000 per child.
Wow.
And I think it's safe and a very compelling argument to say, why is a child worth more or less where they live? Is a
Agreed.
child worth less in Pittsfield
Wow, right.
than in Provincetown? And why don't we have one amount of money we pay to that? We have communities like Sandwich where 70% of our tax revenues go to our schools.
Right. It's a lot.
Boston only spends 35% of its revenues on schools.
That's-
Yet they receive more state aid than Sandwich.
That's very interesting.
And yet that argument hasn't been raised. That argument needs to be brought out. And I think with my experience in working with people collaboratively and raising issues, this is an issue that I think can be fixed, and it could be fixed so that it would be equitable for the entire state. We have other examples in government where we do reimbursements where they're not done that unfairly.
Wow, that certainly sounds unfair.
Yeah, and in Plymouth, for example, Plymouth had to build schools like nearly no other community.
Right.
And Sandwich in the same light. We had to
Yeah.
build 2 brand new K-8 schools in the 90s.
You're talking about the increase in the number of residents on the Cape.
Yes.
Is there also a great increase in the number of children?
Well, we actually have declining school populations, which is one thing that's held this argument in abeyance, if you will.
Okay.
Is that had we not had declining revenue, declining populations of students, our budgets would be unattainable amounts of money.
Right.
So, but looking forward, we have so many other needs that if we could get our Cape delegation to work solidly together to get a new look at ed reform, we'd be freeing up money that could be used for other things than education.
Okay.
And we've always made that a priority as communities, and that's to everyone's credit.
Sure. Well, it
But
sounds
our
to me
needs are tremendous as far as human services and elder services,
Right.
and those are the places where
Right.
we haven't fulfilled our obligations
Yeah.
because we've made education our paramount concern.
Sure. And you do have many seniors on Cape Cod.
Oh yes, and they're a tremendous asset because it's the senior population that's not working
Right.
that has the time to volunteer. If you go through Cape Cod and look at all of the different civic groups and look at who are the people that are making these wonderful civic groups work,
Right.
it's retirees and elderly people who are making this work. So it's really in our best interest to try to make it as affordable as we can looking down the road for people like this. So economic development that increases our tax revenues, like I'm saying, in transportation and those day trippers,
Very good.
and education reform, they all relate directly to everything else.
Right. And I feel, and it sounds to me like you feel also, that seniors are no longer old people.
Oh no.
No, we are the
No.
youngest group, the longest running
Group and have tremendous energy. And,
Yes.
and as a society, we've changed that way
Yes.
so that retirement isn't viewed as putting your feet up.
No. As a matter of fact, I found that most of the people I know who are retired are now doing what they've always wanted to do. And
Yeah, I
with this-
recall when my father was retired, and he hadn't been retired very long, when he said to me, "I can't believe I had the time to do all the things that I did while I was working."
Right.
I'll never forget him saying that.
Amazing.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
the only difference now is that we work as much, but we just don't get paid for it.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yes.
getting the energy out there is very
Yeah.
important too.
Yeah, it certainly
So
is.
it sounds to me like you are very much qualified for the position you are hoping to be elected into. Tell us how you feel about whether or not you have the wherewithal to do this job.
Well, I feel very good about it because I have the training on both sides of the equation. I think I came out of college and had to start my own business right away. It was in 1980, and the economy was in poor condition, and governments were shrinking because of Proposition 2.5 passing,
Right.
and revenues not being able to be increased. I went into my own business and worked my own business for 7 years before I went to work for government. So when I got to work for government, I took a lot of the discipline that I learned running my own business, I brought that to government and stayed in it until I was recruited by a company to go to work for them to do sales and marketing for a pavement maintenance company. I stayed in government long enough to achieve significant milestones, for example, for the town in terms of building a transfer station for trash and capping the town's landfill and passing a road bond issue so that and Sandwich ended up having the best roads of any town. Those are the issues that qualify me for this position. As I said earlier, I'm patient in the sense that I know Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right.
But I also think that my previous experience in both government and business are what really qualify me for this position, and the balance that it takes to make that work.
Excellent. So, what are some new and different things that you might like to apply to Cape Cod?
Well, something I think that needs to be at least looked at is our present railroad bed through the Upper Cape, which is presently used for a part-time scenic train and is used to dispose of the trash from Yarmouth and Barnstable that travels through Sandwich 2 times a day on this railroad track. And I think something that I think should be explored is converting that rail into a bike path, which has been done in other parts of the state. I think to have that rail bed exclusively used for that purpose only, when it's in such a critical location.
Okay.
And for example, we don't like it. It's very difficult to have bicycles on Route 6A.
Right.
It's narrow, it's
Yes.
windy, it's scenic, people are distracted by it,
Right.
and yet there's no alternative for bicyclists and walkers other than to be on 6A. This railroad would make the connection to you'd end up with a bike path on all of Cape Cod.
Wow.
You'd be able to get on a bike path at the Cape Cod Canal and be able to ride your bike to Provincetown on a path exclusively the whole way. So that's something that's occurred to me that should be brought out and should be discussed. And there are lots of players in it, so that you'd have to balance the concerns of the rail enthusiasts. You'd have to balance the concerns of the towns of Barnstable and Yarmouth vis-a-vis their cost of transporting trash to our CMAS plant. And you'd have to balance whatever contractual issues exist with the current railroad. But I think long term, that would be an incredible facility for people to use.
Excellent.
Travels through beautiful salt marshes
Right.
and would connect Sandwich Village to East Sandwich and would give a continual through bike path, which could be connected. you could make connections to it on Quaker Meeting House Road, which would connect the people of South Sandwich and Forestdale to this path. And I think it has a tremendous value in the future used that way.
You do have already a wonderful bike path further down on the Cape, am I
We do.
correct?
Yes, yes. And it originates in Dennis on old railbed.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. It's all railbed,
Okay.
as is the Shining Sea Path
Yes.
in Falmouth,
Mm-hmm.
is formerly railbed,
Very interesting.
as is the Minuteman Path up on the North Shore.
So with the rail being used to transport trash, how often do they do
Well,
that?
I count the cars. I live close to the railroad crossing, so I've become focused on this a little bit, and I've counted the cars, and it's 4 or 5 railroad cars per day. But I suspect from my experience, see, I represented the town on the Upper Cape Regional Transfer Station Board. So I've been involved since the early 80s in this issue of transporting trash to this plant by rail. And I know that there were times when, because of interruptions in the rail, construction on the bridge itself,
Right.
the rail bridge, as well as changes to the plant when the plant had a fire and couldn't accept, we have actually
Wow.
we have actually trucked trash there in lieu of not having the rail.
So it could happen.
And it actually, in
another
some
way.
instances, is cheaper
Okay.
than the rail. So I think in terms of what our issue would be to get a long-term planning window going on when we would enact this and give the players involved time to look at alternative ways of transporting trash, but also look at how important this could be to the economy of Cape Cod.
Excellent.
I think it would be a phenomenal thing.
Sounds like you've been doing homework.
Yeah, I've actually been doing homework for years.
Hopefully it'll pay off.
Yeah, and I've been involved in a lot of projects
Yeah.
that involve that type of long-term commitment and
Wonderful.
involve bringing people together to solve problems.
Excellent. Well, I wish you well.
Very good, and I appreciate being on today.
I
Thank
am
you very much.
so pleased that you came here to tell our people in Sandwich just what you're all about.
Good, very good.
And I wish you luck with
Very
the
good. Thank you, Robbie.
with the election.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here with us at Sandwich Seniority. I'm your host, Robbie Haig, and I do hope to see you again real soon.